All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. You are in tune for a great conversation. This webinar is titled Safe Space When There's No Safe Place. And we are going to be talking about child maltreatment and providing some tips and advice to foster youth, both current and former, and to those who work in the community that support foster youth, some tips and tools on how to better help trauma impacted youth after they experience abuse across all levels, whether before they, while in their home, while in the system, and even after, because we know that trauma follows us well into adulthood. So just thank you everyone for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. And we are going to get started. And so first, we would like to thank our panelists. Yes, we of course want to thank our panelists, but we want to thank our sponsors. This webinar is brought to you today and has been sponsored by iFoster. iFoster helps foster youth reach their full potential by providing youth with tools to become successful, independent adults. And you can learn more about iFoster by clicking the link. This webinar PowerPoint will be provided to you in your follow-up email. And so if you want to learn more about iFoster, you can click the link in the chat. And thank you again to iFoster for believing in us and supporting our event. This is a great conversation that will push the envelope and hopefully empower and inspire some foster youth. Thank you. And so just a little bit about the Youth Voice Program. My name is Raquel Wilson. I'm the proud Youth Voice Program Manager here. I've been with the organization Fostering Media Connections for 2 years. I'm also a former foster youth. And so, using this platform to be able to help empower and inspire foster youth through journalism, different workshops, different writing opportunities that tell the raw truth and stories about what's really happening in the system so that we can try to make some positive change and push the envelope to actually get the support that foster youth need while in the system and well after. And so the Youth Voice, we not only provide those services, we have paid contributor roles, we have fellowship roles, we match our writers with the imprint staff members and other mentors so that they can really lock in on their journalism skills. And so if you want to learn more about Youth Voice, we'll be dropping the link in the chat. Please follow us on our different social medias to stay informed about our events and upcoming writing opportunities, because we definitely keep it consistent. And there will be a recording available to you along with the PowerPoint after this webinar is over. And so right now you should see a quick poll pop up on your screen. And this is for us to know where you're from, what is that, if you're a current or former foster, if you're a social worker, and also how did you find out about us? Where did you hear about this information, about this event, so that we can just, know how to better to connect to other people to make sure that we are blasting our events and our opportunities for foster youth, which are all paid opportunities as well to you all. So you should see a poll pop up. We're going to allow some people to respond, and then we'll put up the results. So yes, I see we have some current and former foster youth in here, which is always good. Please connect with me if you're interested in any of our paid opportunities. I see that we have some caregivers in here, which is always good because you guys are where we go to in the homes. We actually need, the support definitely starts with where we're living. Our social workers, I'm loving that there's so many social workers in here today because definitely going to be receiving some tools. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Our panelists have all been impacted by the child welfare system, and they will love to be able to answer some of your questions. And we'll also have a segment for you to ask questions at the end and for our panelists to answer questions. And so thank you so much for everybody that is in attendance. We appreciate you participating in our poll discussion and letting us know how you heard about our event so that we can better connect. And so at this time, I would love to introduce our lovely panelists. I'm so happy to be virtually sitting alongside all six of our panelists today. Every one of our panelists has been impacted by the child welfare system, including our two social workers that will be speaking today. And so first, I'm going to start with Sade Best, who is a birth and postpartum doula and the author of a self-published book titled Family Lies, which is available on various reading platforms. Her book covers the experience and challenges she faced from an abusive childhood to foster care to homelessness and navigating school to shelters and every space in between. Sade set out on this journey initially to heal herself, but along the way, she found it important to share her story with others that may be going through it as well. It was a story like Matilda and a child called It that really gave her hope and got her through her childhood. Sade hopes to give the same thing to others. She is a recent college graduate in multimedia performing arts, and she is also a songwriter. So thank you, Sade, so much for being here today. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing you share some more about your experiences. Next, we have, and I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right. So Shoshanna, did I say that right? Okay, I want to make sure I said it right. I did. I want to make sure I said it right. So next we have Shoshanna Providence, who was born and raised in the Caribbean and then came to America for more educational opportunities. She's very passionate, empathetic, and persistent in everything she does. When Shoshanna becomes a registered nurse practitioner, she plans on giving back to her community and providing opportunities for youth in the foster care system. She's been a part of the system for 6 years, and she's seen in her many things. She's like the change for the better benefit of every youth. And so thank you so much for being here today. Next, we have Lauren Warner, who is a former foster youth who loves to travel and create art. She gives credit to the foster care, to her foster care experience that taught her the importance of understanding diverse views and allowing for others to heal through self-expression. In government care to separate times for 7 years, she's experienced over 40 different placements in 10 schools across Northern and Southern California. She participated in the AB-12, the THP, and the THPP programs, experienced institutionalization to two separate institutionalization 2 separate times and attended 2 mini course sessions to count. Graduated in 2021 with the BA, and she has a passion for volunteering and helping others. She is currently focusing on harm reduction and opioid overdose prevention in her community. So thank you, Lauren, so much for being here today. We're definitely happy to have you. Next, we have, I'm so sorry, let me scroll down. Next, we have Jen Daylin. I want to make sure I'm saying this right. I'm so sorry. Did I say it right, Jen? Because I'm so used to calling you Jen. So like, did I say it right?
No worries. It's Jen Dolan.
Jen Dillon. Jen Dillon, I'm so sorry, and is preparing to graduate this June with a master's in public policy and master's in social welfare from UCLA. Growing up as a youth involved in both the child welfare and juvenile and justice system, she became increasingly aware of types of disparities and inequalities that the system impacted community face, namely children who have very little agency over experiences they are subjected to. That prompted her professional pursuits with a variety of capacities, school-based settings, research farms, nonprofits, a lot to name, governmental organizations to better understand, serve, and support those populations, namely youth, experiencing high levels of trauma at the hands of, these such systems. And so her experiences ranges from providing direct service intervention, extensive original research, initiating public advocacy in order to address the barriers and issues hindering such vulnerable populations overlooked with society. And ultimately, she is interested in identifying the factors that is impeding on these community pathways to success, and immensely adamant about creating resolutions to combat such. So thank you so much, Jen, for being here today. I'm sorry for messing up your name, but I'm definitely happy to have you as a panelist today. And so our last 2 panelists are both system impacted. I'm very, very excited to announce them both. They are also also working in the field that helps system impacted youth. And so I really, really am excited to have them here because they can speak from their experience from both sides of the spectrum. And so without further ado, we have Lisa Gilbert, who was born a twin, given up at birth and placed in foster care separate from her twin. Life started rough for Lisa Gilbert. She was in and out of foster care until the age of 4 when she was adopted by a single mother. And at the early age, she knew she wanted to work with high-risk youth, children, and families. Lisa received her Bachelor's of Science degree from National University in 2001, where she focused on psychology and addictive disorders. Earlier, she began work with preschool-age children in 1984. Her focus shifted to at-risk adolescents in 1996, Shelter UCSD Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Services. In 2025, Lisa began her work as a protective service worker for the county of San Diego. Lisa has retired in 2020 as a senior protective service worker for the Department of Health and Human Services after 25 years altogether. She developed the AWOL / sexual exploitation specialist position, working with teens who are involved in domestic human trafficking and chronic AWOL behaviors. Currently, Lisa has shifted her focus to training adults who work with high-risk populations. Her passion is helping people see the importance of racial humility and understanding the whole person. She continues to train for the Academy of Professional Excellence and is the training coordinator and job coach for a nonprofit who serves foster youth. And so, Lisa, thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you for using your experience to circle back and help system impacted youth. And I'm so happy that that you are here today in attendance. And last but certainly not least, we have, and Ryan, I'm definitely going to mess up your last name. And please forgive me, you guys. I am so bad with names, but I'll be trying. And so Ryan Karnowski, I think I said this right, is a licensed clinical social worker originally from Washington State. He experienced the child welfare system involvement as an unaccompanied youth while a teenager, which is a large part of what inspired him to become a social worker as an adult. Ryan is 3 years into a PhD program at UC Berkeley, where he studies issues related to transgender youth in the child welfare system and currently works as a mental health clinician. And so, Ryan, again, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for also circling back and helping the community that you once was a part of. And so, for the moment everybody's been waiting for, we are going to get into our discussion. And so at this time, I'm going to welcome all of our panelists up to speak freely about their experiences. I want everyone in our audience to know that this is a safe space that has been created for not only our panelists, but for those who are out in our audience that have either been impacted by some of these issues. You will be hearing some sensitive, raw topic information today. And so please, please feel inclined to, ask questions in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel inclined to, offer any advice as it relates to your profession. If it does in the chat, tools, advice, anything. This is a large community, and the most important thing is that we empower and impact some foster youth. Again, you guys will be receiving a recording of this. And so, yes, let's get into the discussion. And so we've already given a little bit of introduction as it relates to the background and what some of our panelists are up to and have been up to. But we want to go back, take a step back a little bit and get into the background. And so I want to start with Sade. And so the first question is, what is your background with the system? When did you enter the system? Why did you enter the system? And where are you now?
Hi, so thank you, first of all, for having me. My background with the system is I was actually placed in the system when I was 1 year old. I was taken from my mom. As were all the rest of my siblings, it was 5 of us. So each time like she had one of us, we got taken away. And then I actually was like put in a home where I was adopted. I believe I was adopted at maybe 4 or 5. And then my name was changed at 8. And I left that home at about 15 after I endured like a lot of abuse and just finally got the courage to like say something about it. And then I just went into the system where I bounced around from foster home to group home to shelter to everything. And I aged out. I was awarded a state at 16 and I aged out at 19. I got kicked out of the first college I attended because I didn't know what I was doing. And I actually bounced around even more after that because I didn't have anywhere to go. So I was in shelters and sometimes at people's houses and stuff until I finally entered the supportive housing system in New York. And I stayed there for about 7 years until I recently was able to finally get out of there. And I have my own apartment now. I mean, I had an apartment in supportive housing, but it was still an institution in itself. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sade. So I'm going to pass that question over to Shoshanna. Just give a little bit about your background, why you were placed in foster care, when you were placed in foster care, and where you are now.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Shoshanna. My background with foster care system, I was placed into the system because I came to America. I came to America originally in my country of origin. I was sort of in the system in a way. So when I came to America, I came over and I stayed with my birth mother, who was also abusive. So my church family took me in, and then I started living with them. And so I became awarded state as well when I turned 14, because they took me in, and so the system decided that, you know, they were capable of taking care of me. So I started living with them, and for the past 5 years, because I'm not living with them anymore, I'm living with a new kin family relationship. So before that, I was living with them for the 6 years of being in foster care. And yeah, so where am I now? I'm currently in college studying to become a nurse. So that's me now. I mean, there's more to it. So I guess we'll get into it later, but that's the summary of it.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. So I'll pass that same question over to Lauren, and then Jen, you can jump right in right when she's finished.
Hi, thank you for having me. My answers are a little long, but I entered into the foster care system at like 2 very different times in my life. First, when I was 5 years old, when a teacher reported I would show up to school with bruises often. And during that time, I moved to about 10 different placements, a little bit with my family in San Diego, but then eventually my mother regained custody of me. I re-entered the foster care system again at 14, and this was the summer right before high school, and then just stayed in the system until I aged out and continued to participate even after. So the second time I was running away a lot and staying in shelters. I just felt really lost and scared and neglected. My family was very ill at this time. And I hoped that foster care would have been a turning point, but I encountered more struggle and hardship while I was in the system than I could have ever imagined back at home. And then during those 5 years I was in care, I was moved over 40 times, and I attended 6 different high schools. Also placed in group homes and treatment facilities. This really affected my sense of stability. And so I didn't live anywhere longer than 9 months for over 7 years. It kind of continued on, you know, into my adulthood, moving around so much. And then when I was 21, I finally was able to get off the streets and join this transitional housing program called Laverne Adolfo. And this, you know, was a huge turning point for me. I stayed there for 3 years. I had youth advocates, my own apartment, with like some very accommodating rent, resources, tons of encouragement to like get a job and incentive to go to work and go to school. I was provided therapy there for the first time. I felt like I had a therapist who truly understood me because he was also a former foster youth. And this really allowed my healing and understanding to initiate. And then after I left there, I went straight to Humboldt State University, where I was able to achieve my bachelor's in international studies last year. I double minored as well because I just spent so much time in school. And, you know, this just felt really good. I was able to graduate with honors and be recognized by a lot of organizations and scholarships because, you know, I kind of looked for that support in my community. I like went out and I asked people for help, and So it just made those connections really dear to me during that time, and even now. So since graduation, I've moved a few more times, but I'm settled down for the moment. I currently work for AmeriCorps and my local opioid coalition, and I just educate a lot of students on naloxone, which is like a opioid reversal nasal spray, or it could be delivered in a syringe as well. I'm still looking for my dream job and my dream master's program, hopefully, as I try to make it financially possible. And I just aim to utilize my experience moving around so much so that I can continue to travel and help people. I'd love to join the Peace Corps and work with the demographic I feel like I know the best as my peers and my former foster youth. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you, Raquel, and thank Fostering Media Connections just for putting together this panel. I think it's going to be very important conversation, dialogue, just to engage with one another. So thank you for the opportunity. For me, I would say I entered foster care at age 12. My younger sister and I, we both entered the system. Due to the fact that both of our parents were disabled in different ways. My mom physically, my father mentally. And so, yeah, we had entered the foster care system in Los Angeles, dealt with a series of different forms of abuse, maltreatment, neglect. It was almost as if, experiences of neglect with our biological parents were exchanged for, further harm and abuse perpetrated through our caregivers within the system. In terms of reporting such instances of abuse, to social workers, we got varying responses from either moving to different homes or just being blatantly told that, this is the best it's going to get. Receiving responses like that really made me just super critical just of the system as a whole and its notion to protect children. Because from my vantage point, I was taken away from two loving parents who did what they could to really care for us and make us feel loved, to be put into circumstances where it almost felt the opposite was currently prevailing. So for me, I just knew that I definitely didn't like what I was seeing. I wanted to make some sort of difference, some sort of change. Just speaking to different foster siblings of mine and different youth who were involved in the foster care system, I just started to kind of understand and learn that it's not just my experiences, but these are the experiences of a lot of youth who are involved within the system. And a lot of them do try to report or do try to, really advocate for themselves, but, their voice is falling on deaf ears. And so for me, I always had the plan to go to college. And even if I didn't know how, I really took advantage of, a lot of my school teachers and their kindness and helping support me with my educational goals. And so when I entered undergrad at UCLA, I knew that I wanted to do more to try to better understand the experiences of foster youth, but also advocate for them to, their autonomy, their agency. So that's kind of what started me off with research on foster youth specifically, looking at their lived experiences within their foster care placements. And findings from that were just, it ultimately, it just truly inspired me to really pursue, a dual master's degree, both social welfare and policy. So that way I can get a better understanding of, this vulnerable population as a whole, of their experiences of, areas that they need support in, but also, using that insight to leverage for policy change on behalf of these youth, because very rarely are there former foster youth that are in positions that oversee and govern the foster care system. And so, yeah, that's ultimately my goal, my aim. I'm sure we'll talk more, but yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. And you said something really, really, really strong, that we are come from different backgrounds, and although I never seen none of you guys in the foster homes that I ever lived in, we definitely all have similar experiences, you know, and it's kind of crazy. One of the things that you said was that you were removed from your home, you know, where you felt like you were loved, and then placed in, you know, circumstances and situations that wasn't love, you know, and I feel the same way. Like, you know, my mom and dad, you know, they did like whoop us, like, you know, and it was like really extreme, but I really do feel like I could have had, I would have took a million whoopings, you know, like I would have taken a million whoopings compared to some of the things that I experienced while in the system. And so I want to get into that. And so let's talk about some of the maltreatment, you know, the abuse that you faced. Did any of you guys face abuse while in the system? If not, could you speak to some of the abuse that you faced before you went to the system, and what was that like for you? And Jen, I'll need the person that's on my screen, so I'll kick it over to you to start off this conversation, since you kind of led us into this point.
Yeah. So I guess starting off before the system, I wouldn't necessarily constitute like both of my parents' actions as being abusive. I understand under, I guess, legal pretenses, it's considered neglect. If you're not able to, like, you know, if I missed the bus for school, like they, you know, couldn't drive and take me to school. So like that, you know, I guess in terms of those like actual legal specifications, I suppose it was neglect. But, you know, we always, you know, at the baseline, you know, had, you know, our basic needs, had food, had, you know, experienced homelessness, but we were still together. And so, yeah, I totally can relate to what you were saying, Raquel, about, you know, I would definitely have taken that experience over the abuses I have experienced within the foster care system. So specifically within the foster care system, you know, there were some homes where there was physical abuse, which for me was like my first time ever being exposed or experiencing any of that. Um, you know, witnessing other foster children, specifically like the younger ones who I guess couldn't really speak out, being abused sometimes more. And so, I mean, that was definitely or several instances actually. Also the differential treatment between, you know, foster youth within the home and like the biological children. That was also just a running theme I've noticed throughout a lot of my like placement settings where, you know, you're being talked down to and belittled and physically abused in two instances I'm specifically thinking of, whereas you don't see any of that treatment being given to biological children. And I mean, I'm not a proponent of that in general, but just the starking like contrast for me, especially being a child, was really hurtful. It was really hurtful. And it internalized this belief of being less than and not necessarily deserving of, I guess, as much as, you know, other youth. And I think, you know, just in addition to, I guess, the formal abuse that was physical, definitely mental and emotional, like being talked down to, being degraded in certain instances. In one instance, even sexual abuse. I think where the abuse further perpetuates itself is, you know, even going to school and not having like new clothes, or like having like holes in my shoes and stuff like that. And like the abuse is almost like further reinforced and enacted through like my school age peers, because that difference is seen. And so that, yeah, those are just some of my experiences.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. What you said is powerful. And it's really, really crazy the trauma that, like, you know, that just keeps, you know, like impacting us, keep following us. It's like a black, like, shadow that, you know, you just can't never get away from, even while you're running. You said something that really is triggering for me, about like the the clothes and your peers and the holes in the shoes. And, you know, I remember like my teachers used to be like in on the bullying and like the questions like, you know, why you don't, like, you know, like I used to get in trouble for like leaving school, you know, and like one time I just remember, you know, about to get suspended for this, like, you know, because it was like 8 times that I probably did it. I got caught, you know, but I never used to be saying why I was leaving school, and I used to be embarrassed because, but I used to always come back. And, you know, I remember one time I was about to get suspended for it, and I just broke down in the office and I was just crying, like, y'all trying to suspend me and y'all not even asking me like why I'm leaving or what's going on. Like, all y'all see is me doing something and y'all constituting it as a behavior issue, but y'all don't even know that I don't have no clothes. So I'm going across the street because this is where the laundromat is at, and I got to go put my clothes in the washing machine, and I'm leaving on, you know, during the period that I already did all my work in, so I can go wash my clothes, come back to school, be in this class, and then go, you know, the 6th period so that I can still make it home on the bus so I can get home safe, like, you know. And so I think that it's a lot of assumptions that come before, you know, the initial thought where it's like, why are you doing this? What is this happening? What's happening to you? And a lot of people was, you know, walking around treating me like I was angry. And yes, I was angry, but nobody was asking me why I was angry. You know, they was just assuming, oh, she's in foster care, she's going through things. But it's like, no, like I'm going in this house and my social worker is supposed to be coming to visit me every month, but they're not coming to visit me. And when they are coming to visit me, they're calling the parent to let them know they're coming. So the parent is cleaning up, they taking the locks off the cabinet, they hiding the man that's coming in the room at nighttime back in the closet. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like that that these conversations are important. And that's why I'm so happy that I'm able to use the experience that I had to be able to use this platform that I'm working in now to inspire these type of conversations. So we can really talk about the raw, real truth, the real stuff that's happening behind the system that has been so swept up under the rug. Because the fact that I never ever would have been experienced sexual abuse while living in my parents' home, that's something that my mom and dad would have never let happen to me. That never happened to none of my brothers and sisters, but that happened to me while I was in care. And that happened to me multiple times while I was in care. And all they did was give me a 7-day notice and send me to another home because, you know, she's a foster kid, kids lie, who's gonna believe her? Like, no, and nobody did. Nobody believed me. And so thank you so much, Jen, for sharing that. I wanna pass that same question over to Lauren. Lauren, can you talk a little bit about the abuse that you experienced? Did you experience any abuse while you were in the system? If so, what was that like for you and how were you impacted by that?
Thank you for sharing. And thank you for asking me. I have to read again because my mind gets a little jumbled when I think about these things. So I met so many interesting people during my journey, so many hurt people, misunderstood people, angry people, and I was certainly one of them. I was not a problem child, nor did I try to create issues for myself in these living situations, but I just felt like I was so poorly placed, or many foster parents were just so poorly chosen, reviewed, or just barely trained at all. I was punished in so many inappropriate ways and methods. And for like the really withdrawn, like insecure, quiet, and scared person that I was, I know I didn't do anything to deserve such harsh treatment. So to start for myself, I'm just going to list off the things I've experienced. I've had foster parents verbally abuse me, talk down to me, ask me what's wrong with me, verbally like tear apart what they had read in my file about myself or my parents. I've been prevented from using the phone to call my social worker. I've been told to call my foster parents' mom and dad, which is when you're a teenager, you have a mom and dad. And so just, going into someone's home and they're just like, we're your mom and dad now. It's really weird. It's just really weird. I've been in homes where there were hidden cameras and where I was threatened with the evidence that those cameras had captured. So I was blackmailed for being in a space that I was supposed to call home. And even though I had done nothing wrong, I had a foster mother hold up a knife to my throat. I've been locked into rooms. I've had what little things I owned ransacked or stolen or disposed of and gone through. I've had religious prayers and symbols forced into my personal spaces, like throughout my room, with threats, like if I removed them or took them down off the walls. I've been force-fed as a punishment for not eating. I've been punished for being in possession of like Tylenol or Midol, over-the-counter medications. I've been overprescribed a plethora and multitude of various medications without proper therapy or the resources to really understand what's happening to my body with all these different chemicals. I've been locked out of houses. I've been left on the side of the road. I've been lied to. I've been exposed to porn and sexualizing comments. And lastly, one thing that really hurt me and really felt the most invasive was when a foster parent went into my room and went through all my things. And then they took a look into my personal diary and my expressions and my experiences and my struggles. And they decided to make photocopies of every single page. They gave that to my social worker. And then my social worker told me that they had made even more copies and that this was floating around the CPS office as if it was a training guide and like a disturbing phenomenon to these other workers. And you can imagine how little I wrote after that. That just completely obliterated that sense of safety for me. Most of these things happened when I was ages like 13 to 16. Now for the other children in foster care, I witnessed and learned about those who were beaten, who were starved and not fed. I remember living in a home with a lot of small children who would look up at me with their big eyes and ask me to make them food because no one had. And this was one home where there were 9 foster kids plus 3 or 4 full-grown adults. So a lot of neglect occurred in that situation. We had sex workers outside that house often, and I met some foster youth that were prostituting as well. I learned of a boy who had been kept chained up in the backyard and was beaten and fed like he was a dog. He was 10 years old at the time, and I'm not sure what happened to him. And from my friends, I know many girls and boys who have been sexually abused and exposed to drugs. And I just say all this to really reiterate, I know foster care is supposed to be the safe place and this refuge from the terrors, but I would say I face more terror and hardship while in care than I ever would have at home.
Lauren, you are just very, very powerful. And I want to thank you so much for just, feeling, this safe space that you, feel inclined to provide a list to us. And that's literally what it's all about. And I can really relate to your diary story because I think that we've all experienced like at least on one account or several accounts of our privacy and our boundaries, just being totally forgotten about. And so just thank you so much for being vulnerable, to share a piece of some of the things that you've experienced and some of the things that you saw, because this is what the audience the people watching, this is what they need. They need to hear, they need to hear this stuff, and it's just really crazy because I never lived in a group home or foster home with none of you guys. But as I'm listening to your stories, we all just relate in so many different ways, both positive and negative. And so thank you so much again, Lauren, for sharing that. I want to pass that same question over to Shoshanna, and then Sade, you can feel free to just jump in right after her. Please describe some of the abuse that you experienced while in the system or just across all levels, and how did that abuse impact you while you were in the system or even right now? How is it impacting you?
Hey, Raquel. Also, sorry guys, I do laugh a lot, but it's not because it's just my nerves. So I just want to put that out there. But I would take a polar reaction to this question as well, because most of my abuse did occur before I entered the system. But what I've observed and what I've gathered from my abuse before I entered the system and the maltreatment after entering the system and being part of the system is that sometimes that maltreatment and that abuse comes from when you put so much trust into a system that's supposed to support you, supposed to look after you, supposed to treat you different than, your experiences and places that you came from or your home that you came from. And it sort of is a different reaction than what you expected. Like you either go through worse or you don't have the support that you initially thought you would have had when you entered into the system. So that places a lot of abuse or a lot of distrust within the system as well when you enter in, because it's like before I entered in, I trusted that you would have supported me. You would have, supported my words as well, supported me throughout my entire path. But we tend to not see that as we go along. So going back to my experience, as well, I grew up in my country of origin. It's a country in the Caribbean. I grew up without a mother, also without a father as well. And so I went through different homes. I never had my mother, so it's like I had to go through different homes, and they were never really family related. It was always either strangers or people I've never known. And this happened for about like 7 years, not seeing, not seeing my mother, also not knowing who I was going to, what home I was going to next. And yes, sexual abuse did occur, physical abuse did occur, all of that occurred. And it's, to the point, it's just like, during all of those abuse, it's like, when am I going to see my mother? Because at that time in my country, I'm just like, I'm going through all of this and I don't have that motherly figure. I don't have that person that I could now go to, cry to, or take my concerns and my complaints to, like, hey, this happened to me, like let me bring that to you. So all of those emotions and all of those abuse that I was going through, I also initially internalized those and started writing as well. And I realized that we do have a lot of writers here. So yeah, I began writing at a really young age, because I never really had that person that I can go to and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. So my book and my pen was always, always the way I express my emotions, always the way I was able to free myself in a way, and always think about my future in a sense. So I did a lot of that before I came to America. And then when I finally came to America and I started living with my mother, and the abuse never changed. I began like, there were more verbal abuse now from my mother. It's, and physical abuse. I'm a child. I like to say that I'm very much an A+ student. I love to make sure that education is first. That's why I came to America, right? Is to pursue a better education. So education was always first for me. But the struggle and the abuse to that was, how am I supposed to focus on my education when I'm going back home in a place where it's not quiet? I can't study. I can't really focus on the things that I really want to do. So it's like, any little space and any little time I get to read or do my studies, I do. And it shocks myself as well to why I'm here, or, the things that I've accomplished so far, because it's like, I've been through so much to the point that, like, I never went back home to a place that was quiet. I went back home to a place that was constantly like, you're not anything, calling me the JA word. I don't know if you could say here, but, a jackass. I was called a jackass for things that it's just like, I, you think that you're doing well, you think that you're doing something that's good, but I've learned that regardless of how much of a good person you are, there's always going to be someone that tries to find a way to bring you down or tear you down in a sense. So it's like, as much as hard working as I was, as much work I put into school, I came home, I always felt like I was not good enough. I always felt like I was not doing enough. And, for the slightest of the things, I was always hit or abused as well. I never came home to food either. So whatever I ate at school, that was it, because there was hardly any food at home for me as well. So that's also abused from biological family. That's just a little insight of my biological abuse. Now, entering the system, I gained this relief where it was like, okay, yes, I finally made it, in a sense, like, this is finally my home. I even wrote a section of my journal, like, a perfect home, what it is, because at the moment I felt like I had finally entered into that space, that realm, right, where I finally gained a perfect home, everything a child myself who's been through abuse, whether sexual, verbal, I'm finally at a place where it feels perfect, everything's going right. Then I began to realize that my space as well was invaded, where I couldn't believe in the things that I want to believe in. Religiously, I was forced to believe in a certain religion. And if I didn't walk into that path, if I didn't follow that religion, then that I no longer had a place in this perfect home. So battling through that for years, whether or not I want to stay in a place where I'm forced to believe in a religion, or forced to be living in a religion, or forced to walk in a path that I'm not too certain of, or just submit to it. And just, because initially I thought it was a perfect home. So it's like, either I submit to it because, at first it was a perfect home, or I decide to really follow what I truly believe and, speak up and say that's not the religion that I want to participate in. So I battled that also, I battled opening up about my sexual abuse from my past and being told that if, they had known sooner, I would not have been in that home. So it's certain words and certain things that I've been through. And it's just like, okay, I've looked up to you guys. I've seen you guys as a perfect home, but now I open up about things I've been through in the past. And you're saying that I would have never been here if you had known this at first. And and it hurts because it's like, these are things that I've been through and now I feel comfortable about opening it. But my comfortability to open up to you is now your way of saying that I would not have been here if you had known about my abuse sooner. So that impacted me as well. I opened up to the system about it as well. And initially they were like, that is my own personal experience. And when it's my time to share that, I should be able to share that and no one should ever take that away from me. So that I'm very much appreciative of. So I guess, yeah. And others along the way as well. Side note, let me know if I'm talking too much. I've been a part of other organizations as well. I've been a youth advisory board president as well, where I've listened to other youth and care stories as well of the maltreatment they've experienced. And I felt like for years, my years of being in the system, I've also started my own family with those in the system as well, and listening to their stories where whether it's not the maltreatment similar to the panelists here, the cupboards being locked up so that they can't have access to the food that's in the kitchen. And these stories go on, and it's not just one youth, it's many youths. So yeah.
Yes, I hear you. I definitely experienced the locks on the cabinet and food being locked up in the cabinets and not having access to food or feeling like you can't even ask for food. So thank you so much for sharing. Sade actually has to leave us early.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, love. We'll have you back again. I'm sure we will. I want to open this last question up to her, and then we're going to pass the questions over to our social workers so that we can get some of their insight from the outside and the inside, their inside and outside experience. And so, Sade, what was some of the experience that you went through while some of the maltreatment that you experienced while in the system, and how did it impact you while in the system and even now?
Okay, so from the beginning, I experienced maltreatment because I was taken from my mother. I was taken from my mother. She had, I guess, a mental health issue. My father was incarcerated, so I never had either of the two. So, of course, knowing that what I know now with child development, I didn't have those early attachments. So I have like an avoidant, anxious attachment when it comes to people. It's really hard for me to even form friendships, relationships with people. On top of that, the abuse that I suffered within my childhood from very young, because I ordered my adoption packet, of course. But I remember experiences, but because I was taught to doubt my reality so much, and I had so much trauma on top of trauma throughout my years. I was being sent to school and told that I was the problem child. I was abused daily. I have stitches in my face still. I'm getting my teeth, fixed up at the moment. I still have nightmares about this stuff. I know I'm all over the place, but it's it still affects me a lot. It took I want to say 2 years last year and the year before of consistent therapy with someone that I really trusted to really start to unpack this. Me writing actually helped because there were so much things that I suppressed. I got molested when I was 4. This was also in the same home that I was in. I was abused daily, for just existing, for just breathing, to be honest with you. I didn't have to do anything wrong. I always was told that I did something wrong and I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't allowed to play with other kids. I was made to take care of my foster parents' child. She actually made a business out of foster care after a while, and she started to get more children in her care, and I had to take care of those children. I had to take care of her because she was actually morbidly obese, so I had to put on her clothes. I had to bathe her. I had to take care of the household. I had to do all of the laundry, dress her, dress the children, wash everything. What else? I had to basically be on top of my own studies on top of that. It was just a lot. to deal with physical, then emotional and mental abuse, to be told that, you know, there was something wrong with me, to then watch her do it. She adopted me, and then she adopted another child into her household when I was about, like, I want to say 12. And she would abuse her on a daily. I actually watched her break her arm. But she, till this day, she'll still deny it. I watched, like, her also do the same thing that she did to me with that child, and he make her out to be like a problem child when she went to school. The difference is, like, with me when I went to school, like, I was able to like defend myself. I was suspended a lot. I was made out to be a problem child, but I was also very, like, smart and articulate. So I was always able to, like, I don't know, I made it through somehow. But with my younger foster sister, like, she was able to make her out to be such a bad kid that they ended up, like, medicating her, making her out to have ADHD that she just never displayed at home. Like, she would just make up symptoms and say that she had all of these things that she was doing at home that she really wasn't doing at the home. Yeah, it's just so many levels to, like, the things that I experienced within the system. And fortunately, when I did speak up at, like, 15, I was taken out of the home and I was placed in, like, foster homes. I did bounce around for a while because in their minds, I was just a youth and I was just rebellious, because that's what she said. I was just rebellious and I was just acting out. And I finally, like, got into a group home setting where I was able to be around, like, a good group of staff members that actually saw me for who I was and actually spoke life into me, actually, like, planted seeds to let me know that I was not less than anybody else, that there wasn't anything wrong with me, and that I could start over. Like, I didn't have to, like, adhere to, like, the behaviors or the things that they had planted into me to make me believe that, you know, that I wasn't worthy. Of course, like, all of that was, like, beneficial and helpful. But when I aged out of the system and I had to, like, go out on my own and start college, like, I lost all of that because, like, I didn't have any guidance. I never had consistent parents to, like, really plant those seeds in me or to have that support. So when I went on my own, I just kind of lost it. I don't know. I think that's when I got into my rebellious days, to be honest with you. But eventually I found my way back, and now I just use what I feel like impacted me the most, like being taken from my mom. I use that to, like, help me in my doula work. I believe, like, if my mother was supported the way she was supposed to be supported, you know, my life wouldn't have turned out this way. But thank God it did, because I can use my testimony to help others. But I feel like if my mother had the support pre-birth, during birth, and after birth, a lot of things would have turned different for me. So I use that to, like, encourage me into this work. And also I write about my experiences so other youth don't feel like they're alone. Because when I first was telling people about this, it was just like they were bewildered. Like, I could be lying about, like, my life. And when reality, like, I go through this trauma. I have, like, CPTSD. So, like, I get triggered so easily all the time. And it's so frustrating because it's like, I didn't ask for this. You know, I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to, like, have to undo the impact someone did to me. And to think that somebody would be lying or, like, making up, like, their life is, like, it's so frustrating. It's hurtful. It's so many things. And then on top of that, when I wrote that I was coming out with a book, my ex-foster family, they actually got on social media. They told everybody that I had a mental health issue, not to believe me. And then I literally started to lose my mind because they felt like, yeah, like, my, like, how do you call it? Like, my character, like, I don't know. It was just really horrific. I'm sorry to take up your time. I'm grateful to like be in this experience and to hear everybody's story. And I just wish everybody healing and love and light. And thank you.
Thank you, Sade, so much for having us. I know you have to go, but I appreciate you sharing your experiences. I look forward to having you come back, circle around. Fingers crossed, Sade may be our next New York contributor. Woo, 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 woo. But fingers crossed. So we'll talk to you soon and connect. Thank you again, Sade. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, so I want to circle back to Ryan and Lisa now, because I want to make sure that we get to our social workers who have also been impacted by the system as well. And so, Lisa, could you explain some of the background that you've had with the system, while you were in care, and then what inspired you to want to use that experience to now help others who have been impacted by some of the things that you may have experienced?
All right, thank you for having me, first of all, and also those of you that have already shared, I'm not gonna get emotional. I'm gonna try not to, but thank you. As you can see, this is a pretty heavy subject for me. This is the crazy thing about it. I'm gonna be 55. I know, I look good. I'm gonna be 55 in just a couple of months. And this is still a very emotional subject for me. And it's weird because it's not so much about me, but it's listening to the experiences of you all. I spent my first 4 years in foster care. I was born a twin, separated from my twin at birth. And I was adopted by a single white mom who was a social worker. And so I experienced growing up the art of giving and helping others. And so, when you ask Raquel, where did that start for me? That's where it started for me. And I feel like although I was in, 7 or 8 different foster homes back in the mid 60s, they believed that you shouldn't attach. And so they moved kids. I have no recollection at all of any of my time in foster care. I wish that I did, because what I do have is the effects of my time in foster care. And I did a lot. I did a lot of therapy. I'm pretty well-rounded. I feel pretty good about, where I am now in my life. But the effects of foster care, although I don't remember it, stayed with me and are still with me today. And my abuse happened in foster care, almost by default, if you will. You remove a kid from a home, and then you remove a kid from another home, and then you remove a kid from another home, and then you remove a kid from another home. It doesn't really matter what the explanation is. That in itself is traumatic. Even if you're removing a child because of abuse, it's still traumatic, right? A couple of you talked about you would have rather stayed in your own home where there may have been some form of abuse or maltreatment or whatever, and stayed there, and you still were with family. And I think that was the difficult part for me. Plus, I'm a child, a biracial child, half black and half white, in an all-white home. Now, I had a biracial half sister, but I didn't really understand myself as a kid that was half black and half white. I didn't understand it. I didn't want people to know that I had a white mom. I didn't care for parent-teacher nights and any of that stuff. Open house, I didn't want my mother to be any part of any of that. I think the issue that I had was once I was adopted, it's what do you do with those kids now? You feel like it's your forever home, and we've done this wonderful thing because we put this child in a forever home, right? And while I didn't experience any abuse, what I needed wasn't all there. And I didn't get any understanding of why I was in foster care, right? My mother and father were a white mom, a black dad, couldn't care for me. My twin sister had cerebral palsy, so she couldn't be adopted by me. I thought I caused it, right? So all these things that just piled on me as a child, feeling a sense of incredible abandonment. in a room full of people celebrating me for my birthday, and I still feel incredibly alone. And so the effects of foster care don't go away, right? It's important for people to understand that. Don't just let the forever home be the end of somebody's therapeutic and healing journey. I want to real quick, Raquel, somebody had asked about why kids don't talk about maltreatment and placement. I was sexually abused, once adopted, several times in different places, babysitters, the rec center, a friend's brother, right? Just different situations. And part of that is because I didn't have a sense of belonging. And so the first person that said to me, hey, let's do this because I love you, or let's do this and don't tell, and let's do this, and right, I was all about it because I was going to take whatever I could get. And so to answer your question, Marietta, I hope I say your name right. They don't tell. I didn't tell because I didn't know. I didn't altogether know that it was wrong. I also didn't tell because I didn't feel like, I felt like I would lose that connection. Even though that connection may not have been the perfect connection or just the right connection, I wasn't really sure, right? You're a kid, you don't know. And so if I'm going to lose a friend, or I'm going to lose whatever this relationship was, why would I tell somebody and then risk losing that? So I hope that kind of answers your question just a little bit. So then I went into social work for 25 years. I'll let Ryan speak a little bit, and then maybe when it comes back to me, talk a little bit about my experience there. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. You almost had me crying over here, and I cry every webinar I got to, but it's definitely an emotional one. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. So Ryan, I want to pass that same question over to you. Could you give a little bit about your background while you were in care, and then what, how did that prompt you to want to use your experiences to now work in the same field to help trauma impacted youth?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm going to borrow Lisa's joke and say, like, I also look 20 years younger than I am, but I'm 27. So I'm like, I shouldn't have shaved today. What's going on? But I'm 27 and I'm from Washington State. And it's kind of a funny age because it's about 10 years, like, a decade, like there's around like a good hallmark, like where was I a decade ago? I had kind of an unconventional child welfare experience. My family was kind of like garden variety dysfunctional. Like, I'm just like joking when I say that. I'm like, if you know, you know. But I was kind of hyper independent. And I pretty much like lived in the library. I mean, that like is kind of a hyperbole and like also kind of not. I would go to school and then I'd camp out at the library after school, and just kind of like threw myself into academic achievement. So I didn't really get a lot of attention as far as the stuff that was going on in my family life. And as I got older, like into the teenage years, my family life kind of fell apart. There was more like physical violence and more like targeted abusiveness, especially from my mom had like a alcoholic boyfriend who was like physically violent and just very threatening and intimidating. And I was kind of like, you know what, that's it. Like, I'm not going to live here anymore. And there were a lot of police calls to the home and neighbors were concerned, but nobody really wanted to like overstep their boundary. And that kind of speaks to the other end of the racialized aspect of child protection issues, where there's kind of underreporting and under surveillance, or like turning a blind eye to more conventional like child abuse or neglect in like white families. So there's like overrepresentation of Black families in child welfare and over surveillance and over policing. Well, if you're over looking at it in one community, there's also gonna be some proportional under reporting or under surveilling of yeah, almost like, oh, we don't touch that, that's a private issue as opposed to a public issue, and that's wrong in its own regard. But I had kind of I guess I was working, sorry, I'm kind of like going back down memory lane. I was working and in school, in high school, and I was in like a magnet program for like, not like gifted and talented kids, but it was like a charter program for engineering. And I was having trouble keeping it together. I was like completely supporting myself with this job. And I was getting food from like the food pantry in this school. And there was a social worker there. And they kind of ask you, like, oh, what's up? What's going on? And I was like, I don't live at home. My life is a mess. Like when I go home, I get like verbally abused and like, you know, whatever. And she was kind of the first person who seemed to actually take what I was saying at face value instead of kind of treating me like I was some kind of like, oh, well, you must just not be getting along with your parents. And I was like, what? No, it's not like that. You know, I got a dinner plate smashed over my head the other night. You know, like it's not just a disagreement kind of situation. And she was the first person who was kind of like, oh, like this is a serious problem. And she helped me get on food stamps, and she helped me get signed up for health insurance. Like my parents, like they were just constantly having disputes about like who was going to pay for what, and I'm not going to pay for your insurance. And so I'd get hurt and have to go like sit in the like, you know, the university hospital waiting room until I could get the charity care kind of situation. So I finally, as a teenager, like through the social worker, got health insurance and got food stamps and was able to like get a little bit more settled and prepared for when I turned 18 and was just kind of doing everything on my own. So when I went to college, naturally was attracted to social work. I was like, well, that person who helped me out of this situation was really great, and I want to be like that. So that's what drew me to child welfare social work. And I got my bachelor's degree in social welfare at the University of Washington in 2016. And then I did a 1-year advanced standing master's program right after that. But it was kind of a unique college experience because I wasn't eligible for the kind of supports that youth who were former foster youth got. I was an unaccompanied minor, and my parents had literally written a note on a sheet of like notebook or computer paper that was like, we are like handing over our parental rights, like we are not supporting Ryan like through like, you know, financially or with housing or with anything else. Um, if I had been younger, I would have applied for what is it called? Not relinquishment, but when a youth becomes like legally an adult. Yeah, emancipation. I looked into it, but because that can take like a year or 6 months, I was only getting services and benefits through the child welfare system for like a year. They said that wasn't really a good option for me. And I already had housing. I was like couch surfing. So because I wasn't formally in the foster care system, I didn't get like scholarships or like special services when I was in college. And so what I ended up doing was just staying enrolled each summer so I could keep taking classes and keep getting financial aid. And that meant I had more debt, but I was able to like stay living in my apartment. And so kind of sucks for me now. I'm like, well, there's one of those gaps, you know, that people fall through in the system. Like it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm going to be paying it back forever, you know, unless there's loan forgiveness. But that's just the safety net I was able to use. And I'm in I've done 3 years of a PhD over here at UC Berkeley studying trans kids in the child welfare system and disproportional overrepresentation. The the numbers of trans kids who get either rejected by their families or are homeless, or just were already in the child welfare system, and then come out as trans are enormous. And I'm trying to look into why exactly that is and what can be done to keep that vulnerable population in a better place. So that's where I'm at, and thanks for the opportunity to share about it.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you so much for giving us a synopsis of your background and all the wonderful things that you have done to, you know, try to. I like that you talked about like your debt and robbing Peter to pay Paul, because Lord Jesus, I'm in so much debt right now, but I thank God for school, because if I didn't go to school, then I definitely would not have been able to be here. I don't even know where I would have been at. I definitely was not surviving, not at all. So the next question I want to ask you, both you and Lisa, and so how in your work, in your line of work, when you are operating as a social worker, how do you go about identifying and reporting, you know, child abuse, maltreatment, and if you have come across that, and if you haven't, what actions would you like to provide to some of our social workers that are present today, some advice on tools that could, you know, help them in the system and their line of work?
I would say, don't be too busy. Nobody cares, and this is gonna sound really crazy, but I was a social worker with a big caseload. Nobody cares about your caseload. Nobody cares that you have 40 clients and all this paperwork and reports. No foster kid cares about that. Should they? They shouldn't care, and nor should they know. Take the time. Take the time that you have with a kid and listen to what it is that they have to say. I have purchased and eaten more carne asada burritos and breakfast burritos and chicken nugget meals. And I mean, seriously, I will sit down and break bread with a kid in a minute. And that's the time. Just having a regular conversation. I had a client once who, he was 14 in a foster home for the first time. And I was a new worker. And every time I would see him, I would ask him, is anybody hurting you? Is anybody doing anything to you that you know is not right or doesn't feel right to you? Like, I didn't know how to ask, right? Every time. And he'd say to me, why do you ask me that every time you come? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm supposed to ask. I think it's, you know, I don't know, right? And then about 6 months in, he says to me, do you remember that question that you asked me all the time? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, it's happening. And it was then that I learned, don't just stop asking the question once. Pay attention. Pay attention to body language. Pay attention to what kids are wearing. Pay attention to what kids, to hygiene. Pay attention to grades. Don't think because the kids got good grades that everything's going well, right? Don't think that, right? We heard Shoshanna, we heard Ryan, like, look, you know, you submerge yourself into school and everybody thinks that behaviorally you all are great. And so everything is good. Pay attention, ask questions. How are you doing? You got a kid that's got a hickey on their neck? Don't freak out because they got a hickey on their neck. Ask them about the hickey. I had a foster parent freak out about a hickey. I'm like, well, did you ask about the hickey? Was it a forced hickey? Did they like the boy that gave him a hickey? Like, just ask the questions. It's just everyday stuff that you would just talk about with a kid. It's building rapport, continuously building rapport. It's not, for me, I guess it just wasn't a job. It paid the bills, but like I said, my adopted mom, we passed food out in the neighborhood. Like, that's who she was. And so for me, as a young kid, I knew that helping others was the thing to do. It's just what we did as a family. And so for social workers, for foster parents, for therapists, folks, you all have chosen a job. You've picked a job. Maybe it's the job that picked you, but you're in it. And at some point, you're going to sit across a 54-year-old, extremely good-looking woman who still has the effects of foster care. And I'm not just a job. I'm not just a name. Shoshanna and Lauren and Ryan and Jalen, whose name should have been my name because Lisa's so boring compared to your name. Raquel, look, you're not just a piece of paper. You're not just a name. You're not just a caseload, right? Look at who they are now, based on people's crappy mistakes and people not paying attention and people not caring and people just taking the money that comes every month. You guys that are still doing the job, please, we are people on the other end of that pen, and treat us as such. And if you're a social worker and there's some craziness going on, we know you have to move a kid to another home. Figure out how to do that with the least amount of trauma that you can possibly do. And that may mean some hot wings and a Diet Coke. It may mean an outfit, it may, whatever that is, but just do the best you can to make those experiences less traumatic. And don't be afraid to stand up to a social worker. Don't be afraid to stand up to a foster parent. Don't be afraid to stand up to an attorney or a judge. Oh, I'm speaking out in court. Don't be afraid to be the advocate, because if you're going to be subpar, go work at Walmart and be a Walmart greeter. Don't do this job.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You said some powerful stuff, and it's definitely it's needed. It needs to be here. And the social workers, they have to hold each other accountable. We have to hold the foster parents accountable. Like, everybody has to be held accountable. And you can't turn a blind eye to some of the things that you saw. You talked about building a rapport and building trust with your youth. And I lived in over 50 placements, some group homes, some detention centers. Out of all those placements, I had one foster mom that was good to me. And I had over 25 social workers. I had one social worker who was my last social worker. Her name was Jean Torres. I shout her out in every webinar. She works in LA County. I don't know if she even still works there, but her name was Jean Torres. And she was the best social worker that I ever had, because she told me that she cared. And she just didn't tell me that she cared, but she showed up, like she put the action behind it. And even when I tested her, because let's be mindful, we will test you just to see, like, you know what I'm saying, if you're genuine, if you're passionate about what it is that you're doing, if you walk in like how you talking. And she used to still show up. Raquel, I don't care. I'm still gonna hug you. I'm still gonna love on you. I'm still gonna give you that. You mean today? Well, I'll try again tomorrow. You know, and that means so much to me when you come from a line where people are constantly abandoning you or telling you that they love you, but they only love you for benefits. And then once those benefits run out, then it's nothing, you know? And so thank you so much for sharing your expertise and offering some tools and advice to some of our social workers and foster parents and even our foster youth in the audience today. So Ryan, I want to pass that same question over to you. How did you go about reporting maltreatment, if you have? And what is some advice that you can provide to some of the social workers, the advocates, the school officials that operate, within the spectrum in the community that work with foster youth, and give them some tools that, can help them better support when they're trying to create a safe space for foster youth?
One of the biggest things that I think of is, gosh, when I remember the name of this, I'm sure it's going to keep me up tonight. But if you think of a block of marble, if you're chipping away at it, and if you see it, like what you've got in your mind's eye, like how you're imagining how your piece is going to come out when you're done chipping away at that marble is, it's like what you're manifesting. And as far as like interacting with kids, it's kind of a similar thing. If you've got this negative image of who that kid is or how they are or what their behavior is, and imagine yourself as the parent or the social worker chipping away at that marble, well, you're going to manifest and ultimately end up with a real rough looking, depressing, dysfunctional, problematic situation on your hands. But if you're looking at a strengths-based perspective, like here's all the great things about this kid, and here's what we have to watch out for as we're helping chip away at that marble, as somebody who's got a guiding role or a helping role or a teaching role in that kid's life. That's something that I think of when I think of some of all the safety threats. As a social worker, you might be thinking of the 17 safety threats, or I know it varies from state to state, but when you're evaluating whether or not a kid is being mistreated or abused, one of those is whether or not the caregiver or the parent thinks of the kid in really negative terms. That is one of the biggest red flags. I think of the little red flag emoji on Instagram now, because I'm always on the explore page with the little like red flag, like this and that meme. But one of the biggest red flags I think of is when a parent or caregiver is talking about, that kid's the devil, or they're acting like they're possessed, or like somebody said in the chat, they need therapy. Those are a one-way ticket to alienation, as far as how that kid feels or sees themselves, or whether or not their caregiver is safe. And the older I get, and the more I like transition from, kid who got abused to adult who someday, as an adult, you really have to inventory, what are my own capacities to mistreat somebody? Were I to, having experienced what I've experienced, what are my blind spots, and what do I need to heal in order to be a safe and healthy person? Looking back at those caregivers as people who are really, really in need of support, as far as how do they handle their distress without talking about their kid in a disparaging way. So I guess it's kind of a unique position to like come from that position, and previously having a really reactionary, like, oh no, like, that's abusive language, that kid needs to not be in that space, or like that's toxic or that's abusive, to how do we re-equip that caregiver to express their concern and then actually show their love without chipping away at the marble in a way that's going to get a bad end result and be unhealthy for that kid. So I guess as far as like what a litmus test would be on like how to report or identify abuse or neglect, I think it's almost like that Supreme Court case about, like, please forgive me for the reference, but it's like the pornography one, where it's like, you know it when you see it, when something is profane. Well, if you see something that makes you go, as far as whether or not it might be abusive, if you're still thinking about it a while later, it probably stood out to you for a reason. And again, if you know, and you might be the only person who chooses to make that your business. So if I guess there's kind of a fine line between being like a Karen and making something your business inappropriately. But as far as trusting your gut, if something seems off, I think the you know it when you see it principle applies pretty well. And to just bring it to somebody who is able to go through that, itemize out those 17 safety threats and say, is this or is this that? Listen to your gut if something seems off.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. It's definitely, and I honestly feel like that social workers, some social workers be knowing, like they know, but it just will require too much paperwork and too much hassle to, better, more so investigate. Actually been told that by a social worker, and instead of them helping me, they sent me to another, foster home, and it was just kind of like problem solved, but it wasn't a problem solved because that trauma still carries. And so I have two more questions to ask. I want to open that same question up. I want to open it back up and pass that same question over to our panelists. So I'll start with Lauren. Lauren, what is a piece of advice that you can give to a social worker or a foster parent, but in particular, a social worker that, may have a foster youth that needs to have a safe space created for them to report review abuse? What tools or advice would you provide to them to, better help them support a foster youth that has been impacted by abuse or maltreatment?
Let's see, I'm gonna keep this short and really just relate back to Lisa. and just speak to all the social workers. Like, you probably hear this a lot, a whole list of to-dos and not to-dos. But I want you to trust me on this one. I'm gonna just say it again, like thoroughly train and background check foster parents, evaluate them more than the basic requirements, more than if they have fire detectors in their home or hot water running. Evaluate their morals, the behaviors, their histories, their family members, their community, their friends, their religious preferences, their passions, their fears, and everything, because these are all things that are going to dictate whether or not your caseload or your child you're attempting to watch over is going to be safe and successful. Genuinely care as if it's a part of your job. And I know that sounds really redundant and that might sting, but your job is to care. It should be to care. And if they're not training you to care, then that's wrong. That's very wrong. You're servicing yourself to the community. And if you can't do that, then don't. The time that you're going to put in are the results you will receive. And advice for yourself, right? Be stable, like Lisa mentioned. Be confident that you want this job and accept that what it will teach you, and it's going to be really hard. Try to prevent compassion fatigue in your offices to reduce that burnout. Hire and invest in more people to share in those tasks. Work with each other to make sure that those caseloads aren't falling through the cracks. And seriously, make sure that you give the right gifts during Christmas. If you have the ability to give out gifts, if no thought or effort goes into it at all, don't make us feel like even less because you're not paying attention to our gender or our size. Don't tell us it's our fault we don't have a home. Don't tell us we're never going to recover from our eating disorders or our mental health issues or our disorders in general. And just please don't copy our diaries to be advertised in the office. Those are the main points for me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you so much. I'll pass that same question over to Shoshanna, and then Jane, you can chime in with your answer right after her.
Sorry, recall, I slept away. I told you. What was the question?
I'm sorry. So I'm asking for you to provide some tips and tools to a social worker out in the audience who create a safe space for a foster youth or who doesn't have the tools to create a safe space for a foster youth, and give them some advice on how they could better help and support and impacted youth.
Definitely. So I agree with all the panelists so far. I definitely think being there and showing that you care, and that's where empathy comes in, being able to put your foot into someone else's shoes and understand like what the youths go through, instead of, looking at them like, I've never been through that, or your situation is so strange that I can't really understand like what you're going through, or I never understand what you've been through. Being able to show that you, like Lauren said, like you do care, being able to show that you, even if you haven't been in a situation like that, you can understand what the youth is going through, and you can also help provide the resources to help them overcome the things that they've been through as well. And going back to resources as well, providing those resources to youths as well to help them overcome their struggles or any maltreatment that they've been through as well. Because many times, because I've been in care for like 6 years, and each year I've gotten like 3 different caseworkers. So that's like that's like a different part of me too. It's like I never had like one consistent caseworker. It's constantly been like the caseworkers change. And that goes back to what Lisa mentioned earlier, is that you don't get into this position if you don't want to care for the youth. You don't get into this position telling the youths that you have so many other caseloads, because definitely as a youth, that's not something that I want to hear. And that's something that I've constantly heard over and over, which to me gives me the summary as to why I've gotten about like 3 different caseworker per year. It's because it's either the caseload becomes too much, and they say, and I've heard like at least like 1 to 3 of them say that, they're not getting paid enough. So the reason why they're not working at the agency anymore is because they're not getting paid enough for that. And for me, that's sort of like, okay, so you were never here for me. And, and it's not just me as well. It's also like other youths that I've become friends with as well, is that the caseworkers are not there for them. And I feel like this role, this job is to be there for youth that are in care, to be standing by themselves as well as they go through this process as well. And sometimes we lack that. We feel as though, caseworkers aren't really there to support us. It's more of a duty than it is to really support and care for youth. So yeah.
Yeah. For me, what I'd say, I guess, just kind of breaking this down, starting at like the direct service level, I think for social workers, it's just incredibly important, I think, to really be present with the youth when you go out to visit them. And similar to what Lisa was mentioning earlier, I think just really trying to, connect with the youth on their level and really, yeah, just taking the time to be present when you meet with them and try to understand them and just connect with them because it's very important to have like just those sustained relationships, not only just for your job and making that process, I guess, easier, but also just for the impact it has on the youth, like long term, especially with like attachment styles and things. So I think that's very important because the youth can definitely feel when, you meet with the social worker and you know that it just kind of translates when you're not fully present because you're thinking about, okay, I have to meet with this person next, I have to do this, I have to do that. I have this many more meetings this day, and then I have this much more paperwork. And kids understand, children know, they feel it, and they almost feel like, again, like you're just another number, you're just another quota. So I think that's especially important. It's important to, listen to children as well when they express themselves and not just listen to them, but really aim to advocate for them um, on the more bureaucratic side of things, right? So not only just, okay, this youth's having this problem, I'm gonna, move them homes or I'm gonna do this, but like really advocate and like understand like where the child is coming from with what they're expressing to you. Um, yeah, because I mean, you are the direct mouthpiece that is supposed to represent and advocate for their needs and their well-being, right? I think for foster parents, it's incredibly important to really just create a safe, secure, loving home environment. Um, Not just like the external environment, right? With like, your home and everything, but just on an interpersonal level and connecting to the youth, like really trying to understand like who is this person, right? And not just like who am I trying to shape them to be, but like trying to enhance who they naturally are and like understanding that. And yeah, just like connecting with them because it's really hard to navigate the world without like a nexus point, without a home base, right? Like so many of us, we reach adulthood and we don't have any connection to any of the families that we became a part of while we were in the system. And so navigating the world kind of alone and not really feeling too attached to any one like support system or anyone, again, home base, it's disparaging. So I think it's really important if you go into this to really really just, I want to say like just love the youth and like really just like again try to connect with them on their level and just ultimately aim to like foster that environment so that if nothing else they can look back and say, I was loved in this point in time, like I would like these people love and appreciate and value me, so that can translate to, what, I am worth something, I love and appreciate and value me when they're dealing with times of adversity in the future. So I think that's very important. And then of course on a systemic level, I mean, I think there needs to be more funding allocated from the government, specifically federal and state, to like county child welfare offices. I mean, I think that's so vital in creating opportunities for programmatic interventions for the youth so that they can develop the skills needed to thrive, but also just to kind of like overhaul the system. Because yeah, it's unfortunate right now that the demand for foster parents isn't, I guess, necessarily meeting the supply available. So I don't know if there's more incentive, then hopefully that would encourage more foster parents to sign up. But yeah, just yeah, I don't know. Sorry, my last point, because I'm not trying to just ramble.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sorry, my last point, because I'm not trying to go on, but I think it's also important to, on a systemic bureaucratic level, to really involve youth in like a lot of like the overall like decisions that specific like child welfare systems on a county level are making, because you know we hear of these like advisory boards often, and I know for me specifically, I'm just a little bit skeptical of like how much insight is being utilized from these boards when they have discussions and they meet, how much of that is being actually like utilized in terms of actual decision making. And so I think it's important for like any board of directors of any DCFS or child welfare office to involve you know, youth who were members of the system, so that they actually have like I guess voting power for decisions and things like that. So that's what I'd say.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Jen, for your for answering the question. So we are running short on time, and I want to make sure that I at least get to this final question before I get to the last part of our you know, the rest of the segment of the event. And so the last question, and if you guys keep it really short, I appreciate it. Could you just give everyone, could you guys just give some advice to a foster youth that is out there in the world right now, either dealing with trauma that they experience from the experiences they had while they were in care and need some advice on how to get past that? Or could you give some advice to current foster youth that are in the system right now that need to tell somebody and they don't know how? What is some advice that you can give to them in our final thoughts as we get ready to close out this webinar? And I'll start with Lisa, and then I'll pass it to Ryan, and then I'll open it up to our last three panelists.
So it sounds kind of cheesy, but don't quit. Don't give up. If you have to write it, if you have to text it, if you have to put it in a song or a poem, if you have to write a letter and send it, tell somebody. Find somebody to tell. I didn't tell about my abuse until the last day of school in 12th grade. And my teacher was like, what am I supposed to do with that now, right? So tell somebody, just find somebody. Maybe it's a friend who has the courage then to tell somebody else, but don't give up. Right? What was doesn't have to be what's now, right? I'm a 54-year-old mother of 10-year-old triplets. I just pursued my dream of being a stand-up comedian. I'm 6 years in, right? I wanted to do it forever, but I was too scared. Don't give up. Look at the folks that are on this. I'm the oldest one on this panel, right? I'm way old, but the rest of these folks here are still in the process of going to school and finding careers, and just don't give up. Keep fighting and find people that are going to be on your side, and move away the people that are not going to be, as hurtful as that is. Push those other ones to the outside and bring in the people. Even if it's just one good person, call me. I'll be your one good person. Even if it's one good person, just stick with the people that love you, and do not give up.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Ryan, did you want to jump in?
I think as far as working with youth, if they're expressing a sense of urgency, maybe to just kind of receive that urgency with them. I remember being a teenager, and there were so many things that literally were like, this needs to get dealt with right now. You know, the car needs to get moved right now, or it will get towed. Like I need a meal right now, or I need to pay this bill right now, or my credit will get damaged, or XYZ service is going to get shut off. And I think as a social worker, even though we're all in the struggle ourselves, most of us know where our next meal is coming from, and that the car is going to be okay, and X, Y, or Z. So it can be really easy to say, like, you know, slow down, we're going to get this all worked out, everything's fine. And I think starting out, that's how I would have done things. But instead, like, the further I get from that experience, the more important it feels to like really just be there with them, with like, all right, let's handle the things we can handle. Let's let's put out the small fires so that we can deal with the big one, as far as like receiving that sense of like that like really youthful energy of like everything's collapsing right now. So I yeah, I don't know, I guess maybe just radically meeting young people where they're at.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's definitely important to meet young people where they are, because we all are coming from different backgrounds, different spectrums, and we have different trauma and we have different responses to trauma, even if we had similar experiences. And so thank you for sharing that. I'll pass that same question over to Jen, and then Lauren, Shoshanna, you both can unmute yourself and chime in as you best see fit.
Yeah, I say what I really just encourage all youth who've experienced foster care to do is just know, like, the shame, there's no shame associated with your experiences. It's not, I just want you to know that the shame is not yours to hold and carry, and that I really hope that, you know, you find like the space, the opportunity, the time to really just unpack, you know, all of those layers of trauma, because it can just be so heavy and so burdensome. And none of any of this was any of your fault. So I just really want to affirm that, and just want to say, you know, everyone, you know, needs support with their mental health. I believe everyone does. And so I think it's especially important that, like, you know, you find ways to really support that, whether, you know, continuing therapy. I mean, I recommend that for everyone, but just finding ways to kind of, you know, almost like deregulate your internal like nervous system so that you're not always on high alert and operating um, out of trauma, out of, yeah, like fight or flight. Um, Also, you know, whatever it is that you're passionate about, if you know what that is yet, really just understanding that, you know, that's like, allow yourself to be moved and motivated by that passion, and to, you know, when you go out into the world, like really just enable that to be, I guess, what directs you and guides you. Because I know it could be tough when you don't always feel like you have that guidance. So allow yourself to be you know, your own focus and your own, I guess, map to guide and direct your life. Um, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. So I'll pass that last question over to Shoshanna, because I want to definitely give both you and Lauren the opportunity to offer some tips to some foster youth out there in the world. And so both Lauren or Shoshanna, both of you, please feel free to answer the question, and then we'll close out. With some final thoughts and with the segment.
Definitely. So my advice to any youth out there would definitely be, we've heard it here, you're more than just a number, you're more than just another name in a book, another name on the list of, you know, that caseworkers has to do with. Also, you're more than any stereotypes that you might hear out there as well. As long as, I would say, trust in yourself, believe in yourself, use your experiences and the things that you've been through to be the best version of yourself. So yeah.
Every day I'm still learning about myself and my triggers. You know, things happen and there's more and more to work on. So I'm learning more about my pains, my triggers, my hopes and my passions through attempting to heal those. I feel like I've come a very long way and have been able to taste some versions of success in like my relationships and stability, in my health. And I feel like I can identify what those are now, and that feels really good. But you know, at 27, I know I have so much more to learn on my journey, because honestly, some days can really seem like a lot of work and a lot of anxiety. And so we're so faced with like such short, sensitive, tender times on this planet. And a part of me is so in awe, and the other part of me simultaneously is terrified. I spent a lot of time thinking about the what ifs, how my story could have been different. But I've resolved that I'm really thankful to have come to these experiences and learn, because now I have these moments like this where I get to share and connect and understand how, in this world, there's room for every type of person, and we're truly not alone. And we don't have to feel so isolated or terribly and painfully alone in a system that is not only broken, but has the power to break others with it. My advice is to find your sense of community and find a healthy escape. The drugs only help for so long until they don't. The bad groups of people don't last long either, or you just don't want them to anymore. The unhealthy relationships won't ever let you be free. However, if you want love and understanding, you have to look for it. And once you do, I really think that you're going to find people who believe in you and have enough love for you and want to watch over you and want to understand you. And if that takes a long time, just know that you've always had your own back, because you always will. Your independence and your strength and your resilience from this goal is something no one can ever take away from you, no matter how ugly or unwanted you feel. Your survival through crazy people and maybe going crazy yourself is just what makes you so unique and powerful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That was definitely a great way to close out this panel discussion. So thank you all to our wonderful panelists who showed up and showed out today. I appreciate you all for being vulnerable and open enough to, not only speak candid with me, but speak candid with all of our audience members. To all our attendees, thank you as well. At this time, you will see a post evaluation pop up and the link will be in the chat. This is so you guys can tell us how we did today. If there's topics that you want to hear about, please put that if you're interested in being a panelist. As a former foster youth, as a social worker, we're going to try to do most of our panelists are, all of our panelists are, most conversations are from former foster youth, current foster youth who have experience. This is my first time where I've actually invited experts on who operate in a particular field to speak about their work history and their impact in the world and in their field. But I was just very happy to have Lisa and Ryan today, who are also not only just working in the field, but they also experienced the field. So they were able to use their experiences as well, like we sort of did today, to speak candid about our experiences. And so if you can fill out that post evaluation, let us know how we did. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. This is a list of resources that we wanted to provide to everyone. If you need to call one of these hotlines, please feel free to do so. If you need to report abuse, some of us are mandated reporters, and that's our responsibility to make sure that we tell and we help, we help some youth. And so thank you so much. If you enjoyed this event, I'm sure you will be happy to be a part of our next event. We're going to be talking about battling biasness and inviting panelists to speak about the homophobia they have experienced while being a member of the LGBTQ community while in foster care. And it's going to be a really great conversation. We have some really dope panelists lined up for that as well. And so I'm very, very, very happy. And so I just want to thank everybody again. Shout out to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here and speaking so openly about your experiences. Thank you to our attendees who, took the time out to sit here and listen to this conversation. I know that these events sometimes are long, but we do really need to have these open discussions and you guys hear from firsthand experiences about what is happening so that we could be able to try to change the system for all. This is just some of our information. All of our events are paid. We pay our panelists who are former foster youth. We pay our writers through our writing opportunities. And so in order to keep that going, we definitely need to support. So if you are interested in supporting Youth Voice, please click the link. You will receive all of this information in your follow-up email. Again, thank you so much. It's conversations like this that let me know, why when I was in those foster homes and those different things was happening to me, when I used to be asking God, why me, God? Why did you put me here? Why are these things happening to me? I honestly feel like through this job and this platform that I've been able to, create and keep building and keep inviting folks to come speak candidly about their experiences. I honestly feel like that I went through some of those things so that I can be able to help empower and inspire other foster youth. And I hope that I'm doing a good job of it. So again, thank you. I don't want to cry, but I'm just very, very happy about this event. I'm very happy and thankful for my panelists. Shout out to Sarah, who's always in the background holding us down with the technical support. And we definitely wouldn't be able to host this event without you. So thank you, Sarah. Again, thank everybody for being here. If you're interested in connecting about some of our Empowered workshop opportunities where we teach journalism skills and teach youth how to write op-eds and policy pieces to, better talk about related issues that impact foster youth, please connect with me. I dropped my email in the chat, and I look forward to seeing everybody at the next event. Again, thank everybody so much. And everyone have a great Thursday.